All right. So today's lecture, I want to go over assignments. So I gave you a very brief overview of the assignments that we'll cover during the first couple meetings, but I want to go over in a little bit more detail those assignments, particularly the ones that are going to be coming up. So we'll talk about the pre-lab, which is due at the end of this week. So I try to make everything due at the end of the week. So that means that this is the January 31st at 11:59. This is meant to be, again, kind of a preliminary assignment before we start this class lab next week. The next one is the first worksheet. So this is going to be due the following Sunday, so February 7th, same time. So that's a Sunday at 11:59. This will be, I'll show you the kind of the template for worksheets and how that will look and how, most of these worksheets will be formatted. So I'll show you that. And also, it's not coming up immediately. You can see here, but the first lab report on this experiment is going to be due March 14th. Again, that's at the end of the day. But I do want to go over the guidelines for lab reports, because a lot of those guidelines will go into why I'm assigning certain things in the pre-lab and the first worksheet. So let me go ahead and show you that. So if I go to Files, and I go to Assignments, and I go to Lab Reports, and this, I believe, is elsewhere. It should be in the modules as well. But there's information on the citation format. There's a rubric that you can go ahead and look at for the report. There's a sample for the short lab reports, which is what we'll do for the second lab. But I want to draw your attention to this lab report guidelines. So this tells you all the sort of guidelines that go into making the lab report. So it first talks about the lab notebook. Since this will be a mostly online semester, keeping a notebook is a little bit different, obviously, but I still recommend, I won't require it, but I still recommend that you keep some type of notebook. This could be the physical copy that maybe you have from MSE 202. You can do a digital notebook, things like that, even just a notebook that you keep. But I would recommend keeping notes. And so instead of taking notes when you're in the lab like you would normally do, you should be taking notes when you're watching the instructional videos, because I will walk through the procedure of how we do things in the lab and what we're doing and all the conditions. And those are all things that you'd want to write down for future reference. You can always go back to the videos, but it's easier if you can just look it up in your lab notebook. So most of this you probably know from MSE 202, but it kind of details the types of things that you'll want to put in a lab notebook. But secondly, here it's talking about the formats. So when you start writing your lab report, you'll want to look at this, and you'll want to, if you've taken MSE 408 before, then you might already know a lot of this, but you might want to refresh your memory. So first of all, it starts with the full lab report, and the contents for that are defined here. So we have a title page and abstract, one page. These are all the page maximums. There'll be a short introduction, one page. You'll put some theory and background, which can be up to 3 pages. Procedures, which will be 2 pages. And results and discussion, which will be the bulk of the report, can be up to 6. And then you'll have a short conclusion page of 1 page. And then in these classes, MSE 407 and 408, the format I have you do, mostly for simplicity in formatting in something like Microsoft Word, is that I have you put the figures and tables, which oftentimes are difficult to format in line. I have you do those separately, a separate section, and that separate section of figures and tables can be 4 pages. I don't put any caps on references, so that's why there's nothing here. And appendices are not required, but you may find that you want to put those, and those don't have any limits either. So let's kind of go through the parts here, because I want to show you the connection that we're going to have to the first couple assignments. So title page will look like this. You can kind of use this as a template for working on that title page, you'll put your abstract here. This is something we'll talk about on the next page here. So the abstract is basically the summary, right? This is the summary of the entire experiment, and we want to typically try to do that in 200 words or less. And so basically I frame it as answering these questions. Why did you do it? Why did you do what you did in the experiment? What did you do? How did you do it? And what did you actually find, right? So why? That's like the motivation, right? Why are we doing this experiment? What did you do? These are, what did you do? That's kind of the actual experiment. How you did it, this is the procedures. So the order in here is important, but procedures usually go first. But these are the things that, the techniques you used and so forth. And then what did you find? So your results and conclusion. Here you do want to report the results. I think there's a big tendency for students to kind of say, we're going to do this stuff, and then not tell the audience what you actually found. So I always tell people this isn't a suspense novel. You can tell people in the abstract what you found. So don't shy away from that. That's important. So actually have results. And so typically we're dealing with numerical, quantitative results. So make sure you have quantitative, but you can also have qualitative results. And just a kind of side note here, you typically don't want to cite actual figures and so forth in the paper. So you want it to be standalone. So that's what the abstract will have. And again, you want it short. That's why everything there is on the first page. The introduction, this section is where you're going to have, you're going to introduce the experiment and why you're actually doing it, right? The purpose, the objectives. And so this is where you want to kind of connect the experiment that you're going to do to sort of a wider problem or societal issue, right? So, if we're dealing with glass, ion exchange of glass, tell me in real life why we care about glass, right? Make that connection between why we're doing the experiment we're doing and real life. So that's the kind of connection you want to do. And so this is where you're going to also put your hypotheses. So you're going to put your hypotheses in this. And so you often will have more than one. And so you want to put that here. And then very briefly, you're going to say, you want to say how the experiment that we're going to do can answer those hypotheses. And so this is something that's going to come up in the pre-lab, and we'll go over that here shortly. After that, the theory and background. This is basically sort of a recap of all the information you think a reader might need to know to understand your report. And so you can assume your audience is an incoming student like yourself, right? So the kind of stuff that you would need to do to get a firm understanding of the various topics you're going to talk about. So if you need to do a quick recap of ion exchange or glass or mechanical testing that we're going to do, anything like that, the compositional analysis, those types of things, you want to do a summary so that the audience can understand the results. This is where you might also see equations if we need them. The next one is procedures. So these are the things you did, the actual procedures that you used, as well as materials and equipment. So you'll want to list the materials you have, obviously not in a list format, but in paragraph format, but you want to know the equipment that you used, the materials, and then the procedures of how you used those two things. And this is meant to be a very sort of concise measure of that. So we don't want kind of an operation manual of how to use, for example, the Instron machine. We want to know if we were in another lab, how would we replicate those? So the conditions under which we would need to know to replicate those results. So, in terms of the Instron, what kind of setup did you use? What are the spans? What is the speed? Things like that so that you could replicate the results. And so this is where the instructional videos and your lab notebook are going to come in handy, right? In addition, I'll show you in the worksheet, a lot of the worksheet is kind of geared towards these procedures. So I'll show you where that comes in. And then the results discussion. This is going to be the most important. This is the longest. This is why I give you the most room section. So this is where you're talking about what you actually did, the numerical results, the graphs, the figures, the charts, the tables, whatever you have. This is where you're going to do it. So you're going to have those things, but you also need to discuss it in terms of its significance. How does it relate to those to the real life problems and so forth? And then that all obviously goes with conclusions, where you're wrapping up, you're summarizing, but you're also making these bigger conclusions about what your results showed you, and you're tying it back to the hypotheses. Did you answer your hypotheses, or did something else happen? Was there error? So you want to talk about error in this section. And again, this is pretty short. It's a summary. You're just trying to show what happened in the results. And then, like I said, figures are going to be in the separate section. We'll talk more about figures later, but they're going to be here separate in its own section. And the ordering here, you want to make sure that they follow the order in which you talk about them in the body of the report, such as procedures or results. So if the first thing you call out is a table, that's going to be table 1, and you're going to show that first, and then move on as it's being called out in the text. References. So we have decided to use the IEEE format. And so there are documents in the same folder here about using that format. So make sure you are using that. You're welcome to use software like EndNote or Pages to help you with this formatting, but there's also information there. So make sure you're citing the references, and make sure you're comparing your results to others, right? You want to make sure that those things get called out. And then the appendices information is here. So I won't spend any time on the short form right now. We'll come back to this at a later date. But now what I want to do is we're going to move over and talk about the pre-lab, and then we're going to talk about the first worksheet. All right, so we're back here at the assignments page for MSE 407. And I want to start by looking at our first assignment that's due. Again, this is coming this Sunday, and this is the pre-lab. So the pre-lab to the experiment we're starting with this next week. So let's go ahead and look at it. So I'm trying to link everything in one place so that you know where everything is. So I have a PDF describing the assignment. Also, there will be a job safety analysis form that's completed here, and so I have that here, which is a document that you can edit. So docx here, and then it should have the due dates and all of that. So let's look at this. Let's go ahead and make this the full screen and zoom in. So this is going to be again the kind of the overall, this is going to tell us what we're doing the next couple weeks. It's the pre-lab. So the first thing that it's asking for is the hypothesis or hypotheses of the experiment. And so what I want to kind of first emphasize on this point is that this should cover the whole experiment. So more than likely, it's going to be more than one sentence, more than one hypothesis, because you want to make sure you cover the whole experiment. So you can talk about strength, but I'll also talk about composition. So make sure that you connect all of those things. So this is going to be based on what you all decided the past couple sessions in the class, right? What our experiment is, and so this is going to be, what do you think is going to happen, right? So you can be wrong. That's fine. Don't worry about wrong or otherwise. But if you are not sure, feel free to look up information. So there are references that may kind of give us clues as to what might happen in this experiment. So I would definitely encourage you to look into to those references. I put some on Canvas for you. So this is where you're going to put these hypotheses. Next, you want to address how the plan that we've developed, all the conditions we're going to study, how that will address the hypothesis. This is kind of a check to make sure that the hypothesis we have will actually be addressed by the experiment that we want to do. So just make sure that you have that. And so this is where you'll want to briefly talk about the characterization methods that we're going to use, etc. The next step, and so this is the part, the experimental plan of action. So typically when we're in an in-class lab, this is a huge part of what I want you to do, because I want you to have that plan in your hands about what material and equipment you need, the steps that you're going to take, how long you think it's going to take, and the group member assignments. And so this is going to be obviously a little different because this will be done by us for you on behalf of you. And so this is where, the group member assignments will mostly be us. But you can give us an estimate of how long you think the time will take, and then you'll definitely want to mention the procedural steps that we take based on the plan that you came up with. So this is where you want to try to be as detailed as possible and describe the plan of action. Also, again, if you have any references based on your hypotheses, etc., you're going to have a references section. Could be just one or two. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it could include the textbook from 403 or journal articles. And so use the IEEE. So if nothing else, just put a reference, a sample one, so that we can grade you on the appearance of your references section. Make sure you're using the IEEE format. We can give you any critiques that you might need to do. Again, this will be in the lab report, right? You'll have a references section, and so we can give you some feedback now when the stakes are a little bit lower, and we can help you along for that. So this is why I wanted to bring up the lab reports first, because all of these sections are kind of geared towards that. This is a much more detailed version of what the procedure section will be, right? The hypotheses showed up in the introduction of the lab report. So all of these are geared towards the lab report. And then the last thing here is something that we've incorporated in the last year is the job safety analysis, or we often call this the JSA. So there was the document underneath this assignment where you can find this form. And so let's go ahead and go back to that. All right, so if we go back down here, this is the document. And so it should also open if you click it, but you can download it. And so, dates, times, group names, put all that. You can put a rough goal of the experiment. And what I want you to focus on for this job safety analysis, because when you're writing these job safety analyses, you're typically concentrating on one aspect, one task. And so what I want you to focus on for this is the ion exchange treatment portion, right? So the actual treatments themselves. We're going to do other things throughout the course of the weeks for this class lab, but I want you to, for now, focus on the ion exchange. And so that's going to be, and you can put the rough experimental plan from the previous, and this is where you start to list your safety considerations. So just a description of this, the safety involved in this experiment. So we haven't actually done this experiment before, right? The job safety analysis form is something used in industry as well as a little bit in academia. But the idea is, before you ever step foot in the lab, you would complete this so that you know what the hazards and safety considerations are for that task, right? So you haven't done this experiment before, so you might not have a firm grasp of every little detail. And so we will definitely take that into account, but we want you to think through as many of those safety challenges that there are going to be. And then we'll revisit this later, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So, again, we might change this a little bit moving forward after you've kind of seen what the experiment's about. But I want you to do this before we've done any of the tasks. So, so you just complete all these things. List your name, equipment, team members, and the first section here related to the safety part is PPE, so personal protective equipment. You've probably heard this a lot during COVID with regards to masks and so forth. But in the lab, we obviously have different concerns as well. So for that treatment that we're going to do, make sure you mark which ones are appropriate, which ones we need to wear. And then hazard summary. Again, I want you to think through the experiment and see which ones of these apply. If you don't get them all right, that's fine. This is meant to be kind of an initial treatment, and we'll go through what everybody kind of missed in those cases. So list all the hazards that you think this part of the experiment will cover. You can list the operating conditions here, temperature and pressure. You'll have, if there's any special operating conditions, you'll list them here. Available safety equipment. So this, we're going to have you leave blank for this first pre-lab assignment. Next week, and I'll show you in the worksheet, but in the worksheet, I'm going to have you look at this again. So we're going to fill this out because this is something that you have to kind of have a tour of the lab first. So hold off on this for a second. I'll tell you more about this in the next assignment. And then you'll also want to put the material safety data sheets, MSDS, or sometimes SDS, for all the reactants and so forth that we're using. So in this case, think about the materials that we're using, the chemicals that we're using for these ion exchange treatments. So you'll want to look at those. And you can attach those to the document. And then this next page, the chemical information page, this all of this information is for specific chemicals, and you can get this information on those MSDSs. So you'll have to have that to fill out this table here. Same thing with toxicity. All of this should be on the MSDS. And then any chemical reactions that could potentially happen in our system, you'll want to write those down in this section. And then in this last section, I believe this is the last section. Yep, the last section here, you're going to have safe operating procedures. And so these are emergency shutdowns, startup, run, shutdown, and waste disposal. For this, you're going to do the best you can, but a lot of this you won't know the procedures for that. So if you don't have an idea, just leave it blank for the time being, and we'll come back to this. All right, so that is the job safety analysis, and that is part of this initial pre-lab. So again, we haven't done this experiment before. You're just starting out, so we know that this job safety analysis will probably not be what we want in the end. So basically what we're kind of looking for here is that you do your best, you fill out as much of that information as you can. And then we are going to kind of revisit this, and we actually have another assignment in the future that will be to do another JSA for the steel lab. So we're trying to get you better and better at looking at the safety aspects of these labs. Okay, so we've taken a look at this pre-lab, which again is due Sunday. Again, up here you can see the information. So now let's go back to assignments, and look at the first worksheet. So again, this is due next week. And so we'll click this. And so here, all we have is a link. So like I mentioned, a lot of the information, the data and so forth that we have is going to be on our Google Share Drive. And so I put the link here so that you can find it more easily, but it should be in, if you have, again, I'll probably just keep a link of it or something, but you should have that MSE 407 S21 share drive. This will have everything in it, and this is where the link goes. So if I click on it, it'll be this document called Glass Worksheet 1. And so let me go back to it here. So if you go to that folder, if you have that addressed to the share drive, you can see that the worksheet's here, and so you can click on it. So I just found an extra, I just want to have an extra link for you to get it. We'll have all the data in here as well, and that progress spreadsheet with all of the links to the videos and so forth is right here. So let's look at this worksheet. So first thing I want to just mention to you is this is the template. I came up, this is what I've made for you in the Google Doc app through Google. And so this is editable. I believe that's a word. But what you want to do is this is meant to be your template. So this is the assignment, but I want you to make a copy for yourself. So if you just go up to File, make a copy, and save one with a different name, because we don't want to ruin this for anybody else. So this is just meant to be blank. This is just the template. You make a copy of it yourself. And so then you can fill it out. So that's what the instructions are. So make sure you always do that. I also put a link here to get back to the assignment if you want. And then I put the due date here, and I'm going to fill in as we go along, and as we get the videos that you need to watch for that week or set of weeks. So that will be here. So the first one is the Welcome to MSE Labs. So our lab manager, Nancy Miller, she made a video kind of giving a tour of the labs. And so that's what's here. So you'll need this for the first section. And then as we get the other videos, you'll see them populated here, and you'll be able to find them in the lab progress if you don't see them here. So the first section, there's 2 questions on JSA, so the job safety analysis. So you've already turned in the pre-lab, but this is a couple extra things based on now having some additional information about the lab after watching the videos listed up here. So after watching the movie that Nancy put together, the tour of our labs, what I want you to do is fill out that available safety equipment section on that JSA, right? So that was basically where everything is safety-wise. So where is the chemical shower? Where's the eye wash? All of those things. And so Nancy does a really good job of showing you where those things are. And if you can't find one of those things, look again. I went through it myself, and I was able to find all the things on that available safety equipment. So it's all in there. You might just have to look a little closer. So make sure that you fill that out after watching the video, and then just replicate the table or whatever below here. So make sure you put it in this your version of this document. And then also, as we go through and as you watch the instructional videos for the ion exchange treatments, what I want you to do is, after you've seen that now, and you've thought about maybe a little bit more in depth about the procedures that we do for this lab, I want you to see if there's any modifications you would make to the JSA with this kind of new information you might have. So put that there. So you probably, once you see these videos, you'll realize, oh, I didn't think about this aspect of the experiment, and therefore now I know I need to wear gloves or something like that. So make sure you put those things here. And so this is where, again, we're developing this skill of looking at this job safety analysis. And so you might not have got completely what we're looking for on the pre-lab, make some modifications here, and then you'll really be ready to go for the steel lab. Okay, next, this is, I tried to group it up into sections that would be relevant based on the videos. So this is preparation of glass. So there's going to be a video on how we actually prepped the glass to do these ion exchange treatments. And so I want you to kind of summarize what we actually did, all the little steps that we did to get from the as received glass rods that I'll show you in the video all the way to the actual ion exchange treatment. And then also I want you to, there'll be some data and there'll be videos and photos to show you the dimensions. And so I want you to tell me what the typical dimension is of these glass rods. All right, and then the last section here, which has 4 questions, is on the actual ion exchange treatments themselves. So in your, when we planned on Monday and Wednesday, we came up with percentages that you wanted to test in terms of composition of these nitrates. So I want you to make a quick table here below, basically listing the actual masses of the salts that we will have in the data files in the share drive. So we'll take pictures of the nitrates as we're massing them. So I want you to give the actual masses that are in those photos, And then also calculate the weight percentages, because we're targeting what you told us, but there can be slight differences. So I want you to actually make that table and calculate the weight percentages so that you have that for your lab report. Also, I want you to look at the videos and the images that we upload, and get an actual count of the number of glass rods that we used for each condition that we tested. Right? We told you 30. See if that matches with what we're testing. And then after that, again, I want you to kind of outline the steps that we undertook to do the ion exchange treatment steps. So we're trying to mimic the plan that you gave us, but again, because of realistic conditions, we might have to adjust, or you can add in a little steps there. So that will be another step. And then the last thing is you'll have photos of the glass rods after we ion exchange. So we'll kind of progress the whole experiment, and we'll show you the glass rods. So make any observations about the glass rods post ion exchange for the different conditions. So you'll probably have, maybe you don't have observations of some conditions, maybe they look the same, whatever, but maybe you have for certain. So tell me which one you're talking about, and then any observations that you notice in the videos, in the photos, about what happens after. So that's kind of the things that we'll be looking for. So again, this is I kind of think of this as in parallel to your lab notebook. So this is kind of meant to be worked on as you're working through the instructional videos and the photos of the data and so forth. And so that's where you'll kind of fill in this information. And I'm not just trying to make you do work. I'm doing these worksheets so that you're watching these instructional videos and kind of getting the parts that are important to your experiment, right? So that you know what's going on. You're watching the videos, following along. You're not just having it on the background, right? Because I want you to have that. I want you to have as much of the experience as possible for actually doing the lab. So, the worksheets will be similar to this, where you'll be kind of collecting data, and you'll be making tables and so forth to kind of get the initial part of the experiment of just collecting data and getting it all in one place before you can start to do the analysis. So it's just meant to do that for you. So that's what a lot of these will look like as we progress through. But I did want to show you the first glass worksheet so that you have an idea of what to expect for the ones to come. So these, again, I want you to kind of relate these back to the lab report. I'm trying to get you ready for those later assignments like lab report 1, or coming up the second lab report, or the presentation at the very end. So these assignments are typically that kind of first step. All right, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. I want to make sure you have a good idea of the various assignments that are coming up, and how they relate to that first lab report that will be coming after the conclusion of lab 1. So for this, so for this week, make sure you have the glass lab report, pre-lab, the glass pre-lab turned in by the end of this week. And then next week, make sure you are looking out in the share drive, in the progress document, for the new videos that are going to be uploaded. And there will also be data that goes along with that. We will post that as quick as we can. And so then for next Sunday, you'll complete this worksheet. So kind of have this open as you're working through the videos and so forth. So that will be what's coming up next. You can see that after that, a couple weeks later, we've got the second worksheet. That is because we have 2 weeks for 4-point bending. So we'll be doing a lot of work in the lab, getting a lot of data up to you for that. And then you'll be able to work on that in 2 weeks after that. And we'll keep going for the lab, and you can kind of see the progress that we're going to go through. So hopefully this was a helpful kind of run through of the first assignments. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a nice week, have a nice couple weeks, and let me know if you need anything.